What did I say? The Crimson Room was electric that night. Smoke hung thick in the air, swirling lazily under the dim red lights. The club was packed wall to wall, bodies swaying and grinding to the pulsing rhythm emanating from the stage. And at the center of it all, seated behind a gleaming black piano, was Marcus the Prophet Johnson. Marcus's fingers danced across the keys, coaxing out a syncopated groove that had the crowd moving as one. His dark sunglasses reflected the stage lights, giving no hint of the unseeing eyes behind them. But Marcus didn't need sight to feel the energy of the room. He could sense it in every fiber of his being, from the vibrations of the floorboards to the charged atmosphere that crackled around him. As he played, Marcus remembered how he'd ended up here. It had been a long, hard road from the tiny church in rural Georgia, where he'd first laid hands on a piano. Back then, he was just a skinny kid, with dreams more significant than those in the town he grew up in. Music was his escape, his solace in a world that often seemed determined to keep him down. He remembered the countless hours spent practicing, first on that old upright in the church, then later at the school for the blind where his parents had sent him. There he'd indeed found his voice, both literally and figuratively. The instructors recognized his raw talent and nurtured it, pushing him to explore new sounds and styles. But Marcus had come into his own on the streets of Atlanta. He'd spend his weekends busking on corners, playing for spare change and the occasional appreciative whoop from passersby. There he developed his signature style, a potent mix of gospel, rhythm and blues, and something entirely his own. Years later, Marcus was headlining at one of the hottest clubs in New Orleans. He'd paid his dues, working his way up through seedy bars and second-rate venues. But word of his talent had spread, and people came from far and wide to hear the Prophet play. As the song reached its crescendo, Marcus leaned into the microphone. "All right now," he called out, his voice rough and full of soul. "I wanna hear you now. Can you give me a little something?" The crowd responded enthusiastically, voices rising in a wordless call and response. Marcus grinned, feeding off their energy. This was what he lived for, this connection, this moment of pure musical communion. But even as he basked in the spotlight, Marcus couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. The applause, the adoration, the money, it was all nice. But lately, he'd found himself longing for something more. Something real. His struggle to find true fulfillment in his music was becoming more pronounced. As the song ended, Marcus stood and took a bow, basking in the thunderous applause. He then made his way off stage, guided by his assistant, a young woman named Lily. "Great show, boss," Lily said, pressing a cold water bottle into his hand. Marcus nodded his thanks, taking a long drink. "Yeah, it was all right," he said, his tone non-committal. Lily frowned, picking up on his mood. "Just all right. The crowd was eating out of your hand out there." Marcus shrugged. "I don't know, Lil. It's starting to feel hollow, you know. Like I'm just going through the motions." Before Lily could respond, the club's owner, a portly man named Big Joe, interrupted them. "Prophet," Joe boomed, clapping Marcus on the back. "Another knockout performance, my friend. Listen, I've got some big news. A record producer in town is a real big shot from New York. He wants to meet with you tomorrow. This could be your ticket to the big time." Marcus forced a smile. "That's great, Joe. Thanks for letting me know." As Joe waddled away, Lily squeezed Marcus's arm. "See? Things are looking up. This could be your big break." Marcus nodded, but his heart wasn't in it. A record deal had been his dream for so long, but he found himself hesitating now that it was potentially within reach. Was this really what he wanted? His internal conflict was palpable, his uncertainty casting a shadow over his long-held dream. The following day, Marcus sat in a plush office, listening as the record producer, a slick-talking man named Davidson, laid out his vision. "We're gonna make you a star, Prophet," Davidson said, his voice oily with false sincerity. "I'm talking about world tours, platinum records, and the works. All you gotta do is sign on the dotted line." Marcus ran his fingers over the contract in front of him, his sensitive touch picking up on the raised ink of the legal jargon. Everything he'd ever wanted was right here. So why did it feel so wrong? "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Davidson," Marcus said slowly. "But I'm gonna need some time to think about it." Davidson's smile faltered. "Think about it. Kid, opportunities like this don't come along every day. You snooze, you lose." Marcus stood, unfolding his white cane. "Then I guess I'll have to take that risk. Lily, could you show me out?" His decision to reject the contract was a testament to his courage and determination to find his true purpose in music. As they left the office, Lily was practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Marcus, what are you doing? This is everything you've ever wanted." Marcus shook his head. "Is it? I'm not so sure anymore, Lil. I need to clear my head. Take me to the park, will you?" They spent the afternoon in Louis Armstrong Park, with Marcus soaking in the sounds of the city, children laughing, birds singing, street musicians playing for tips, a symphony of life that no recording studio could ever capture. As the sun began to set, Marcus turned to Lily. "I've made my decision," he said quietly. "I'm not going to sign that contract." Lily gasped. "But why? This is your chance to make it big." Marcus smiled, a genuine expression that lit up his whole face. "Because I realized something today, Lil. Music isn't about fame or fortune. It's about connection. It's about touching people's souls. And I can do that just fine right here." The next night, Marcus was back at the Crimson Room. But this time, something was different. Instead of his usual polished performance, he let loose, playing with a raw energy that electrified the crowd. He poured his heart and soul into every note, every word. As the night wore on, Marcus called out to the audience. "All right now, I want to try something new. I will play a little something, and I want you all to sing it back to me. Can you do that?" The crowd roared their assent. Marcus grinned and launched into a simple, catchy riff. The audience picked it up quickly, their voices rising and falling harmoniously with his piano. Marcus and the crowd engaged in a musical conversation for hours, trading melodies and rhythms back and forth. It was unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. He realized this was what he'd been missing, this raw, unfiltered connection with his audience. Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him as the night ended. He knew he'd made the right choice. This was where he belonged, not in some sterile recording studio, but in the clubs making real music with real people. The next day, word of Marcus's performance spread like wildfire. People called it revolutionary, a new form of music that blurred the lines between performer and audience. Offers started pouring in, not just from record labels, but also from music schools, community centers, and even hospitals looking to explore the healing power of music. Marcus took it all in stride. He accepted some offers and declined others, always staying true to his newfound purpose. He started a music program for underprivileged youth, teaching them how to play and truly connect through music. Years passed, and Marcus the Prophet Johnson became a legend in his own right, not as a chart-topping star, but as a musical innovator and community leader. His performances were still talked about in hushed, reverent tones, described more as spiritual experiences than mere concerts. And through it all, Marcus never lost sight of what truly mattered. Every time he sat down at the piano, he remembered that night at the Crimson Room, when he'd rediscovered the true power of music. One evening, as he was finishing up a benefit concert for the youth music program, a young girl approached him. "Mr. Johnson," she said shyly, "I want to be just like you when I grow up." Marcus knelt, bringing himself to her level. "That's very kind of you to say," he said with a warm smile. "But you know what? I think you should be yourself. That's the most important thing in music, and life. Be true to yourself and let your voice shine through." The girl nodded solemnly, taking his words to heart. Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction wash over him as she walked away. This, he thought, was his true legacy. Not platinum records or sold-out stadiums, but the lives he'd touched and the music he'd inspired. Marcus felt truly content as he made his way home that night, the streets of New Orleans alive with the sounds of music floating from every bar and club. He'd found his rhythm, purpose, and place in the world. And as long as music was in his soul, and people were willing to listen, he knew he'd always have a home. The end.